joining us for USA Biz Party, the chat after the chat. I'm here with Sue Canfield of ASOMA. And Sue, what does ASOMA stand for? AUSOMA?
Authors Social Marketing.
Arthur, yes. So Sue
Yes.
you specialize specifically in helping authors of nonfiction books get their books marketed on social media. Is that right?
That is correct. That is my primary work, though I have worked with fiction authors, and I do work with people who aren't authors at all, but always around social media marketing.
Very good. Very good. So this week's USA Biz Party, we talked all about how do you get, this whole month of June has been about selling, writing, and publishing a book. And of course, everybody wants to be the bestseller. We want to get to the New York Times bestseller or Amazon. Of course, if Amazon says bestseller, then everybody goes, ooh. But there's a lot of things that go into consideration with bestseller, and a lot of them we don't think about soon enough to help get our book out there so that the people who the book is meant for can actually find it. And so let's talk a little bit about that. One of the things that I was surprised about, and I'm sure you're probably not surprised after working with me a little bit here, is Sue is actually doing an audit of my promotional needs for my upcoming book, Tweet and Sell. And so, yeah, I'm sure she can speak from some personal experience with me. But there was something that really struck me in our conversation on Twitter, Sue, and that was you have to think about promoting the book well before the book is published. Well, somebody even said 6 months. Was that you?
That was me, and I really think that that's a minimum, but do you want me to go ahead and address that a little bit?
I do, because I think that so many times as we're writing the book, we're not thinking about promoting it, maybe because we don't think we're ready to start telling people about it. We don't feel it's ready. We're not ready to start promoting it because of maybe the imposter syndrome that so many authors deal with. I even heard Stephen King has imposter syndrome.
Absolutely. I think every author probably does to some degree, you know. And so I believe that an author, the minute they have an idea to write a book, really should start promoting it. And what I mean by that isn't that they're necessarily even going to say, hey, you know, my book is coming out next June, so buy it. But you know that you have value to share. And a lot of that value is going to be in the book, but you could start sharing it now, little bits that are going to pique the interest. And I think 6 months is kind of a minimum of starting to do some book marketing before you publish your book. I think a year is better, or even more if you're really looking at long term. Because the point is that you do have something of value to share, and the more you can share that and prove to your audience that you have something of value to share, the more your audience is going to be engaged. They're going to share it with their audience, and you can start building that list of people so that when your book is actually ready, now you've already got a list of people who have been following you, who have joined your email list, who are anxiously awaiting it. And that will help with this whole topic of bestseller. If you want to become a bestseller, and again, that could be defined in a variety of ways, actually, but if you want that label, whether it be on Amazon or somewhere else, you've got to have spent the time to get a lot of people interested in your book. It's not that you publish your book and overnight it's a bestseller. It doesn't work that way unless you've already put together the foundation of, you know, getting your message out there, letting people know what you have available, and having them follow you.
Well, and it can be exhausting. I remember when I published Black Belt Selling, and it was, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work. And I didn't do a lot of the foundation work that we're going to be doing for my book that's upcoming. But I mean, I still got into a bestseller category. I think I hit like number 3.
And that was on Amazon, right?
A day. It was Amazon, right? And that's, you know, that's an interesting thought too, because you really have to decide where you want to be
Right.
bestseller. And you really have to build a strategy for that, because Amazon's going to require one strategy. The New York Times bestseller books are going to require a whole different strategy. International bestsellers, that's another strategy.
Right.
So, you know, what can most people are doing self-publishing these days, or what we call self-publishing.
Right.
What are some things they need to keep in mind for that?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. You know, first of all, I think that everyone needs to define what is a bestseller to them, because there's a difference between being on the New York Times bestseller list or being a bestseller in a particular category on Amazon. Does it mean to you that you sold 10,000 books, or does it mean you just got a bestseller label on Amazon one day when your book sold a lot of books, you know, on that particular day? So I think that's part of it. Knowing for yourself what you want as a bestseller. Bestsellers are generally noted for being a top seller with these lists on either the New York Times or Publishers Weekly, USA Today, Washington Post, some of those, and they track all of that based on, you know, the sales from national and independent bookstores and sales from other retailers like Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But it's also, there's not like a real formula, and it's not exactly arbitrary, but it's not super straightforward either. So it's interesting. Tim Grahl, I don't know if you are aware of who that is, but he's a well-known author who has written quite a bit. And he wrote several years ago an interesting article on bestsellers. In fact, I have the link right here. I'm going to send it to you so that if you'd like to include it in the notes for this, that would be great.
Yeah.
Let me put that in the chat really quick so that you've got that. But one of the things that he said in this article and other places is that at this point, and this was actually written a few years ago, that he said at this point, the results of New York Times and other bestseller lists are so far outside of an author's direct control that it doesn't make sense to make these lists a goal anymore. Instead, he says, focus on the reader. And he goes on to say even that bestseller lists are becoming obsolete. And I agree with all of that. And I believe that instead of focusing on bestseller list, that an author wants to focus more on, am I reaching the right audience? So not that you know, if you are listening to this, don't say, okay, throw it all out the window. I'm not going to try to be a bestseller then. Okay, go ahead and try. But not to, you know, make that your main focus, or to get so obsessed with that that you then forget, you know, that there are readers out here who may be interested in your book. So, you know, having a little bit of balance that way, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a best-selling author, and most people don't even know what I wrote.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm actually, after this soul-searching process that I've been doing with Tweet and Sell, which I'm really excited about, because the more, you know, I work with you and the more we dig into this, the more I'm like, wow, this is really going to help people. When I first started, it was like, yeah, I think I want to write a book because of the things I've learned. And now that I'm really getting into it, I'm really enjoying the process of bringing it all together. And I'm really looking forward to the people I'm going to meet and be able to help with the book. And so, so now I'm looking at my first book, Black Belt Selling, and thinking, okay, it's not reaching the people I'd intended. I mean, yeah, I've got the moniker of best-selling author, but it's not benefiting the people who could benefit from it the most. And so let's take a look. I mean, we weren't originally going to talk about that, but I think it would be a good point that we do have people who are watching this video who have a book, and they're probably thinking, yeah, you know, I mean, it made the bestseller for a couple of days on Amazon, but, you know, it's not reaching the people I want it to reach. What could they do to rectify that? It's totally selfish, by the way, just letting you know.
Because you want to know. And I want to step back and just talk a little bit first about Amazon bestseller, what that is, what you can do, and then I want to say how we could leverage it to get exactly what what you're saying, how to reach more people. So most people don't realize that to get bestseller status on Amazon, it's actually a little bit easier than you might think, but then it also doesn't mean as much, like as being on the New York Times bestseller. But as a self-published author, you're probably never going to get on the New York Times bestseller, whereas you might be able to get an Amazon bestseller badge. Looks like we've got Tom joining us. So
yep, he's I saw
be
him
great.
on so
Yeah.
but he's not using his video. Okay, Tom.
We'll see if he jumps in here.
Yeah, I'm also watching my internet because I did have to do the jump last time, so
okay.
ready if I need to.
Okay. Do you want me to continue, or should I wait?
Well, let's give Tom a minute. Tom, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we
can hear
Hi,
you
Tom.
now. Yes, sir. Are you going to turn on your camera, or are we just going to get to look at your name?
I haven't even bothered to look in the mirror myself this morning. And since you record these for future publication, no idea what this is going to do to my image if I turn the video on. But then again, you know, you got what you got. So let me get this flap off of here. And we'll see. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to be late.
We're glad to have you.
But working with one arm makes life a little difficult these days.
Yeah.
Boy, I got to get rid of this this virus hair.
I know, and it's not getting any better. I mean, everything is so crazy.
As someone mentioned, they said that, don't worry, Tom, Christmas is coming. And I'm thinking, yeah, you know, I mean,
why not? Your arm will be, you know, and kids get kind of rambunctious with the arm. You go, yeah, well, Santa's giving you coal if you don't cut it out. You know, I mean,
exactly.
You got some leverage there, man.
So good to see you both. Again, my apologies for my tardiness and whatever appearance you get. Here it is.
It's good to see you, Tom.
Thanks.
And
So,
we were just talking about the
Sue,
importance.
you were in the middle of explaining something
Yes.
that I was just catching.
Sue, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so first I was talking a little bit about bestseller status on Amazon, what that means, how to get there, and then we're going to talk about how to leverage that in your ongoing book marketing efforts. It's fairly easy to get a bestseller status on Amazon if you do a few different things. One is when you put your book on Amazon, narrow down your category. So if you just put it in the category of nonfiction, there's going to be tons of books there. So getting bestseller status in just the nonfiction category is not going to be easy. So you narrow it down, you know, is it a self-help book? Okay, but then what else is it about? You know, so really narrowing down your category. And the thing with Amazon is you can change your book's category. So some of my clients have, as an example, put their book in one category and ran it for a while to see what would happen, and then put it in a different category later and run it to see what happens. So there is that. Also, Amazon does hourly updates. So you could possibly get a bunch of people, and this is what people will do, you know, a bunch of people to buy your book on a specific day, even within a specific hour on Amazon, the Kindle version, the print version, whatever. So if you've already developed this audience of people in a big list that you can say, hey, this is the day the book's going to launch, would appreciate it if you could buy it between the hours of 10 and 11 a.m. on Pacific time that day, and you get all kinds of sales within that hour. You know, the following hour, your book is probably going to show up with a bestseller tag if you've done it right and narrowed the tags and categories down and really truly did get enough people to purchase your book within that time. And then what you want to do is you want to go grab a screenshot of that with the bestseller tag and make sure that you keep that, because the following hour another book could become the bestseller in that category, and then the tag's not going to show up anymore on your book. But if you've grabbed that already, so yes, now your book has become a quote-unquote bestseller for a specific period of time on Amazon within a specific category. So pros and cons doesn't really mean a whole lot because just about anybody can do that. On this, at the same time, it did get that tag, you've got the screenshot, now you can use that to leverage. and do your ongoing book marketing. So like we were talking about earlier, Anna, it isn't so much that it's become a bestseller now, it's that you can now use that to leverage and continue marketing your book so that when you are reaching out and as you're getting reaching to your audience and finding those potential readers, you can say, oh yeah, it was a bestseller on Amazon also, you know, here's my proof. But truly it doesn't mean a whole lot. It's more important that you continue your ongoing book marketing.
Yeah.
It's that continuous effort, you know, and again, leveraging that is wonderful. It's great that you were able to do that, but now what are you going to do to keep it up? And again, I've had authors, probably close to a decade ago, I remember an author, and this is exactly what he did with his very first book. Just had like 10,000 people on his list. Everybody had been excited for a couple of years. Boom, got that book out there. And now he's done like a dozen or more books, and almost every one of them becomes an Amazon bestseller on the day of book launch because he has grown that list and has had that, and he leverages that constantly. So those are the things that you can do to get a bestseller on Amazon and then keep using it, because the little tag will go away unless it truly does continue to be a bestseller. Harder to maintain it than to get it once.
Yes.
If I may, you're probably both familiar with Brian Tracy, prolific author and management guru of all sorts. And I go on and off his mailing list because my personal belief is, you know, I love you, Brian. I love your works. I do not need 15 emails a day. The guy just blankets you constantly with all kind of, now, and some of it's good tips, you know, I mean, he's free with his information and such, but wow, my email is full enough without so many from him. But one of the things I watched him do a couple of times with each new book launch, he would promote it to what I'm sure is a vast email list. And then would say, if you buy it on Amazon, specifically Amazon, on this date and these times, exactly like you're saying, email me the receipt. And I will unleash for you this torrent of, you know, this white paper and that white paper and this CD and this set of instructions and, you know, $10,000 worth of benefit. You know, I'm exaggerating, of course, but, you know, $10,000 worth of benefit just for buying this one book on this day at this time. And it dawned on me rather quickly from what he was doing, exactly what you're saying. Right. There's a method to this promotional part that lets him have an immediate bestseller. Right. And if you have that kind of list, if you have built up that kind of excitement, I think it's an outstanding way to go. So all I'm really adding is something that Brian Tracy did, which was there's nothing wrong with adding promos for the people who do buy the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, go ahead.
That's such a good point, Tom. And actually, I've known quite a few authors that have done something similar, or they've even partnered with another author that's perhaps written a complimentary book. And so they both are trying to get the book out there at the same time, and they will share with each other's lists. And so you're much more likely to get people to purchase the book on that particular day and time if, like you said, you've got something that you're giving away. It's an incentive for them. They're like, oh, great, I want to buy that. A little bit of caution, that got so overused that a lot of people don't like that anymore. If you're somebody like Brian Tracy, you're probably going to be able to do it and get away with it. If it's just, you know, me trying to do that, I might not have as much success. And so if you do that, I would make sure that whatever you give away truly is of value, not just, you know, oh, here's the top 10 books, which by the way, or top 10 tips from my, you know, book, which by the way are in the back, on the back cover of my book as well. You know, so you want to make sure that it truly is something of value. And unlike Brian Tracy, I probably wouldn't try to give away $5,000 worth of stuff, which is exactly what he does, because people will feel overwhelmed, you know, unless you are a big name like him. So just a couple of little notes of caution regarding doing that.
All well taken. I agree with you.
One of the things that keeps coming across in our discussion here is that it's really important to have a strong email list. Very important to have a strong email list that you can market to and share tidbits. So one of my strategies right now is I put out a weekly newsletter, and unless there's something really pressing going on, so for example, COVID kind of reared its beautiful head, ugly head, whatever we want to call that. And so, at that point, it's really maybe not appropriate to push out book material as much as it is to deal with the issue that people are talking about and is on people's minds. Maybe there could be relevant material there for the book. But what are some really, again, what are a couple of really important ways that you can grow your email list, Sue?
Well, one, have a sign up on your for your newsletter on your website. So many times people just kind of forget to do that. So obviously it needs to be on your website. I would promote it on your social media periodically, saying, would love to have you sign up for my newsletter. If you have an incentive, then you can put that in there as well. Sign up for my newsletter, get your top 10 tips, whatever it is that you're sending out. If you have an Amazon author page, which every Amazon author should, or every author really should, make sure that you include information in the About section that says, sign up for my newsletter. Every newsletter that does go out to your already existing list, I would invite within it, have a little section that invites people to share it, forward it, so that other people can sign up for it. And also, even if the email that you send doesn't have anything to do with your book, always include just a little link at the bottom. It doesn't have to be overt or have a cover picture of your book or anything, just a little link that says something about, visit my website to learn more about my upcoming book, or, my book's coming out June 2020, 2021 I meant, because we're already here at the end of June.
Well, yeah, we're a little late for this
2020.
year,
but something, just it doesn't have to be this big overt thing, but just a little something that says, it reminds people that, oh yeah, I've got a book coming out.
Very cool. Any tips that you've learned over your years, Tom?
Well, I hesitate to share any for the simple reason that, and this is a bit of true confession. I have done and tried a great number of things, but to declare any of them particular successes would be extreme hyperbole. And so that's just a tactful way of saying, beats the hell out of me, because nothing I've tried has really been great. Now, I have slowly built my list, and by having consistent newsletters and the monthly leadership webinars that I was doing, and there's of course a story behind that, I'm probably going to restart those.
Okay.
Yes, you are. Oh, by the way.
Okay. And
you heard it from her mouth.
Yeah. And she'll follow up. I know her.
Uh-huh.
I have his phone number. I have his phone number, so yeah, I'll follow up.
My point being that the benefit of my current email list is that I get almost no bounces. I get no rejects. I have extremely few unsubscribes. And every month through the website signups and things like that, I do pick up a few. I would love to be picking up 100 a month, but what I'm usually picking up is less than 10. And so that's why I say what I've done has not been successful. The part I'm happy about is I've cleaned up my list so well that at least the list I have is quality, if not extensive. And that's about the best I can say. I would not pretend to tell anyone how to build their email list, because there's absolutely nothing I've done that in my mind has worked well.
Well,
That's
and I think
such a good point, though,
yeah.
Tom, that it's more important to have a quality list than a quantity list. Because if you have 10,000 people on your list, but only 300 of them even care about your message, the other however many were just there because they signed up to get your freebie and forgot to unsubscribe, then what's the point?
Exactly.
It's much better to have fewer people, but people that are truly engaged.
Yeah, and two, there's the philosophy of, well, get a lot of people because you're going to get unsubscribes. And so I guess that's really a matter of strategy and preference for how you want to build your list. So a big list, again, it just depends on what is important and what is your strategy and who your target market is too. Because in your case, Tom, probably you know, your list is going to be more exclusive simply because of the material that you work with and the people that you're trying to reach. One of the things we wanted to talk about too was in book launches. So we recognize that we need to be starting early to promote the book, promote what we're going to be doing. We also want to start to cultivate relationships with influencers. And as you're getting ready to launch a book, it's not probably, you know, you're a month out or 2 weeks out from launching the book, reaching out to influencers at that point probably is not the best timing to get their support. So let's talk about reaching out to influencers as you're getting ready to launch a book. What are some best practices for that?
I agree with you that you don't want to wait, especially if you're looking at a fairly big influencer. I mean, they've got a lot on their plate. They're quite busy too. So you want to look, you know, again, I'm thinking 6 months in advance. Another thing is if you're just looking for a little blurb from an influencer, you could actually write it yourself. As a kind of a template, if you would, and send it to them and say, you know, wondered if you might agree with this or something. They're probably not going to have time to read your whole book, nor are you going to maybe even have the book finished when you're hoping for a blurb. So maybe send a sample chapter and ask them to just read that one chapter and see what they think about that. But long before you ever approach an influencer, you better know a lot about them, been following them, been liking their stuff, commenting on their posts, sharing their posts. To just go cold call an influencer and say, hey, would you write a blurb for my book? Not going to happen. But if you've developed a relationship with them already, then it's much more likely to happen. So that's what I've encouraged my clients. We help them to connect, you know, perhaps on LinkedIn first. It's a little bit more professional network where people are often more likely to connect with you. But even then, when we're connecting with them, it's, hey, read your blog post over here, really enjoyed this, totally agree with it, or have this comment about it, and connect with them. And then again, you're following them on all their social media, you're sharing what they share, you're liking what they like, you're making a comment on their blog post. And then when you do finally approach them and say, hey, I'm writing this book that I know you've written about this topic here as well, would love to have your thoughts on it, it's gonna come across a lot more friendly and more likely to be accepted and get somewhere then versus just cold calling them.
So you really need to provide value as you're engaging in this relationship with influencers instead of just showing up. And I guess it's almost like, yeah, it's like any relationship. It's a sales relationship. You're asking them for something in exchange for something else, and you have to be willing to initiate the exchange.
Right.
Tom, anything? As our leadership guru?
What I'm trying out a new phrase there, leadership philosopher.
Oh,
Ooh,
philosophy.
like that.
That's right. That's right. Leadership. I'm going to have to write that down, make sure I get that right.
No, I was writing a white paper about leadership competencies. And I'll share the story. The government goes through these phases, and their acquisition professionals are required to go through certain levels of training. And there used to be in the leadership, in the acquisition professional competencies, a section for leadership. And I was pitching it to a contracting officer, that's the people who actually do the buying for the government. And he said, well, Tom, the problem is I can't get approval for any leadership classes anymore. I was like, why not? You desperately need it. Oh, I know we need it, but they took leadership out of the competencies. I was like, that doesn't sound right. So I went and did some research and found out, sure enough, he's right. They've divided it between technical competencies and what they call professional competencies. They don't use the term leadership anymore. And within the professional competencies, they have decision-making and communication and all of the leadership principles that you would expect to be there. And so I wrote a white paper that explains that evolution, and then used an appendix to say, okay, the government says, here are your highlighting issues. Here are what we expect you to learn from this. And in the last column, I mapped it to my book. And I said, so I can teach this, and let's not call it leadership. I don't care what you call it. People need this training. And I listed each of the WBS elements, or a sampling of them, because in some cases they're broad, of the elements. And that's the white paper I'm hoping to have done by the end of this week. It's the opening of the last quarter of the government fiscal year. Whatever funds they have left over, I would love to see them send my way. And so it's a marketing piece, clearly. But it's a white paper that explains how, one of my issues is how leadership definitions are so badly structured. And we talk leadership, we end up talking past each other because the terms themselves and the elements of leadership do not have broad definitional agreement. So it was in that process when I stumbled upon the thought of leadership philosopher, and that's where that came from. But that wasn't your question. Your question was, sorry for the diversion. In my defense, I am taking drugs these days, all prescribed, but boy, do they make me loopy. So what was the question again that I was supposed to be answering?
Well, influencers are leaders.
Influencers, yes. Okay. So in the midst of writing my book, I reached out to, I'll call him an old friend. Norm Augustine was the president, chairman, the head honcho of Martin Marietta Corporation. I worked there for 11 years. And because of my role in the general counsel's office, I was always on senior staff. So when he would travel around the country and meet with senior staffs, I was always in the meetings. So very early in my career, I was able to rub shoulders with folks like him. And we'd talk, we'd be at the cocktail party and we'd chat and we'd talk about business issues and mergers and acquisitions and all kinds of good stuff. So it's not like I was on his Christmas list, but he knew who I was. In writing the book, I remembered a quote from him that was very simple, very pithy. He said, never shoot the messenger. It dries up the supply of messengers. And I wanted to cite that. And I went back and I reread 3 of his books trying to find it. I couldn't find it. Now, he had since retired, and I wasn't sure I could track him down. But I did, through the company, and explained to him what I had and why I couldn't find it, and what did he suggest. And he wrote back and said, well, I don't think I ever wrote that in one of my books, but yes, I use that phrase frequently. I'm sure you heard me say it. So I wrote back and said, thank you very much. I'm gonna cite this email exchange that is our confirmation that you did say this. He then turned around and wrote me a very nice email about my attention to detail and how, it was sure to be a quality work and all this. He never seen any of the book. It was just from this exchange. As publication time drew near, I reached out to him again, long shot, and said, any chance I could get you to write a foreword? And he very kindly said, I would consider it, except I'm headed off to Europe for 3 months and I'm going to be busy and I can't do it. I can't meet publishing deadline. I said, okay, fine. But if it's all right, I'm going to use your kind words you gave me in the last email. And sure enough, in the front cover of my book, where I have people who have commented favorably, I got me a quote from Norm Augustine complimenting me on my work.
Excellent.
So outside of my circle of aerospace and defense contractors, there's probably not a lot of people who recognize the name. Within that circle, though, that's a lot of credibility. So I'm only sharing this anecdote to share that the way you get the impact of influencers is through the relationship.
Yeah.
Right? You're saying you've got to build that relationship. You've got to run in those circles. You've got to play in those games. And candidly, as an introvert, and I am an incredibly strong introvert, I hate those things. But if I'm going to have my business survive, I have got to put myself out there. I've got to break through that wall and pretend I'm friendly and cordial in groups. I'm not. Put me in front of
I
it.
beg to differ.
Well, you fooled us.
I
think
beg
you
to
are,
differ, Tom. I
Yeah.
beg to differ. You're always such a gentleman, and you're always so gracious.
Yeah.
And I mean, but it is so true. The foundation of everything, the foundation of even writing your book. Who are you writing this book to? You're writing a book to build a relationship with people. You're writing a book to people who you have the ability to make their lives better. And they're not just money fodder. They are real people with real challenges that you have the ability to help. And so the foundation is relationships. You were going to say something, Sue. I interrupted.
No, no, you didn't. But what I was going to say was back to what Tom was mentioning as far as building that relationship and with that person who within his industry is known, even if they aren't maybe an influencer to the rest of us. That's a really important point. If you are trying to reach out to an influencer, think about the topic of your book and the industry you're in and who is important to your readers, not necessarily to the entire world, you know.
Right.
Maybe you thought you were going to get Stephen King to write a blurb about the book that you're writing about writing, you know, because he wrote on writing, and that might not happen, but maybe there's somebody else more, you know, in your smaller sphere of influence that means somebody to the people that you would be reaching out to. So don't think that it has to be a nationally known influencer to help get a blurb that will help get your book up on the bestseller list. It can be somebody that is known to your readers on a smaller level, and it still has a lot of value.
And I think one of the things that we're walking away from today is that bestseller isn't what it used to be. Bestseller is a way of achieving or of identifying that we have expertise, of elevating and leveraging that expertise. But if you're not a best-selling author and you're still impacting people with your book, then you are still a best-selling author, because it's not about the number of copies you sell, it's about the number of lives you help.
I like that, yes.
Any final words before we close up? And then next week we will not be meeting. Next week is the 4th of July. Supposedly my son is supposed to come, and that's we're waiting to see if his patient who's being tested for COVID gave it to my son. It's like, so we're waiting to hear. But anyway, getting back to bestseller, anything you would want to, any last words of wisdom you'd like to share, Sue and Tom?
Really, I think we've covered it all.
As I said in the chat, the life of a bestseller must be awful, you know, with so many clients and so many publishers searching you down, and then, you know, the family showing up out of the woodwork looking for all this income you're making from your bestseller. And of course, that's my attempt at humor, in the sense that it's not really all it's cracked up to be. Yes, it's a nice credential, but there are many, many other credentials. The mere fact that you published a book,
right,
goes a long way. And so I guess I would just suggest to people that there's not every award that you might seek that really has the return that you might think it has. And by building the relationships and being a genuine person, you're going to do more to help your book sales than anything else. Personal opinion, no empirical data on that. And so I just leave it at that. Not to diminish bestseller, you know, it's great. But when I see so many people manipulate things to get there, as was put out in the chat about finding some corporate purchaser who buys a bunch of them, gets you on the list, and then returns all the books. And so that's cheating. And I don't think it's fair. So,
and that goes right back to how we started this conversation, Anna, when I said that, you know, bestseller, first of all, you need to define what that means for yourself. And it doesn't necessarily mean book sales. And it's like Tim Grahl said, it's much more important to connect with your readers than to say, oh, I was on some bestseller list.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining me, Sue and Tom.
Thank you.
For all of our listeners, our viewers, you have a wonderful 4th of July. Be safe. Be safe. Do not take any unnecessary risk. Wear your mask, wash your hands, practice social distancing. Above all else, enjoy the holiday. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about new normal. New normal. Boy, I think normal has gone up and down quite a bit. I don't know if there is any more normal. Well, again, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you, Anna.